Well, this week's episode of Vikings not only resolved basically everything that was going on in Wessex, or at least for the time being, it resolved it, but in addition, it really dealt with the theme of a shift in power and who comes out on top after a given conflict. So, with that being said, this was another one that I really enjoyed, and really more so than ever, I'm looking forward to Ragnar and the other Northmen going to Paris because it looks like that's what they're going to do in the next episode if the promos are any indication. But aside from that, this was primarily an episode with character interactions. There wasn't really a whole lot of violence in this episode, if any, which is something that I actually kind of like. In a show about Vikings, it would just be so easy to just have a group of brutish, very brutish caricatures, very stereotypical, just go and raid and pillage. It would be so easy to do that. But the fact that they are actually taking their time developing these characters, developing these relationships, and really hammering home the point of different cultures interacting and how it doesn't always have to be about they don't actually always have to be in physical conflict to actually form a narrative conflict that we can get into. They don't actually have to physically engage in battle to have a conflict, is basically what I'm saying. And by that I mean really a lot of these alliances are based solely on convenience and very little else. There really isn't any indication that Egbert really cares about anyone as much as he cares about himself and his own personal interests. But with that said, he's still an interesting character, and probably my favorite scene in the entire episode. Actually, no, I'll get to that in a second. Basically, the plot is, Ragnar and the other Northmen come with Princess Quenthrith and her brother back to Wessex, where the plan is to have her and her brother have joint rule over Mercia, while Egbert really has control over them. How Mercia is basically going to be sort of almost like a subdivision of Wessex. So that's the plan, although it goes a little awry. While at the same time, some of the Vikings are going to stay behind and manage the lands that Egbert gave to them in exchange for their help, while the rest of them are fixing to go home to Kattegat and, to manage their Viking affairs. Lagertha has to deal with her earldom, or lack thereof at this point, and Ragnar has to deal with being the Viking king and, decide what they're going to do next. So yeah, in that, it was, most of the episode took place entirely in this celebration, this party, this gathering of the kingdoms of Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, briefly, and the Northmen, the Vikings. So, really a whole lot of room for character interaction here, and that was something that really drew me in, because not only do we get to see more interaction between Ragnar and Egbert, who up to this point have really been separate for most of the time. They've talked before, but they've both been off managing their own affairs, and we can actually see how alike they are in separate scenes. Whereas now that seeing them interact and how they almost have this sort of rivalry or sort of grudging respect for each other. They really understand where the other is coming from. Because there's this one scene, and it's a very, like I said, it's my favorite scene in the episode. They're just kind of sitting there very casually and sort of just asking questions about the other. And it's almost like two friends having a drink, honestly, because they're just watching the celebration from afar, and they're asking questions. Ragnar's like, so what'll happen now? And Egbert says, oh, well, Princess Quenthrith and her brother will go back to Mercia and rule. And Ragnar says, but they won't really rule. You will hold lordship over those lands, technically. In reality, you will control them. And Egbert says, well. So So yeah, questions like that, and then also Ragnar says, "So are you corrupt?" And Egbert's like, "Yeah." "Are you?" Ragnar says, "Oh yeah." So so yeah, real quick casual interactions like that I really enjoy, and not only that, these are two well developed characters, very authoritative characters who have actually worked their way to the level of success that they are at now. Just kind of having a chat and sizing each other up and looking back at what they've built together. So yeah, really enjoyed that scene. Difficult to explain why, but I just did my best. And in addition, some of the drama between other characters is additionally interesting. For instance, Egbert asks Lagatha to stay behind at Wessex, and she says, "You know, I need to go back to my earldom." And he says, "Okay, how about a personal request? I am requesting personally that you stay here." And she says, "Oh well, I've enjoyed your hospitality, and I've enjoyed the sex, but I've come to understand that you only care about yourself." So once again, Lagatha has cemented herself as one of the smartest characters in the show, if not the smartest character in the show, because she just read him like a book. Because all this time he thought he was manipulating her, and really going over her head, and when in reality, she saw right through him. So really enjoyed that scene, and the acting is very good on all fronts too. Travis Fimmel, Catherine Winnick, Clive Standen, Gustav Skarsgård as Floki. He has become increasingly distanced from the other Northmen, particularly Ragnar and Rollo, because he just considers associating with the Christians, or associating with the Christians, and working with them, not only a sacrifice of their traditional Viking culture and ways of life, but in addition, he sees it as an insult to Odin and the other gods. So a very religious character like him, although he is kind of nuts, would naturally have a problem with that, and that's actually what I kind of had a problem with in the previous season, when he was seemingly being manipulated by King Horik and seemed to have this complete animosity toward Ragnar. But here, in contrast, I found it much more understandable. And in addition, Athelstan, George Blagden's character, Athelstan basically is really conflicting, not only with his sort of dual religions. He's still kind of indecisive about whether he wants to support the pagan gods, Odin and all of them, or Christianity. And this is actually somewhat personified, or actually given some sort of a physical representation in whether or not he should stay in Wessex to be with Judith, who is Egbert's daughter-in-law. Although I'm not really sure how that would work, considering that they would have to be very secretive, and that would be especially difficult now that Egbert's son is back. But he actually makes a pretty smart decision, I thought. He's actually, in a way, he's sort of washing his hands. He says, "I'm going to go back with Ragnar and the other Northmen." He's actually leaving this problem behind, instead of giving in to this lust, giving into this desire. He's actually taking a smart decision. I mean, maybe not what he wants on a more passionate level, or, if I'm being really cliched here, on the level of true love. Maybe that's not what he wants, but at the same time, he's using this. So going back with Ragnar and the other Northmen, really an understandable decision from that perspective. And the stuff in Kattegat regarding Kevin Durand's character, Harbut, I believe that's close to his name. He's increasingly getting some influence over there, or at least he did, now that not anymore, since he kind of disappeared into thin air. But Siggy, this is a spoiler alert, Siggy dies. Siggy tries to show her usefulness one last time by saving Aslaug's and Ragnar's sons from the ice, from the frozen lake. Although Kevin Durand pulls them out, And upon seeing, this is really due to assumption, because at first when she comes back up from the water, when she surfaces after rescuing the kids, she at first sees some woman, and this may be that because I haven't watched the first or second seasons of this show in a while, but I have no idea who this woman was, or why the show suddenly shifted into slow motion as if it was this big reveal. Because as far as I know, we haven't seen this woman before. Maybe we have, but I don't remember her, and I don't remember her having any sort of relation to Siggy. But when she surfaces a second time, and she sees Kevin Durand taking the kids, and this is, again, very well acted by Jessalyn Gilsig, she sees that, she can't really contribute anything to Kattegat anymore. She thinks her usefulness has run its course. And I actually think, while this scene was well done, and I think the death scene was actually kind of beautiful, not only in how it was shot, but, in how it was played, I actually think another interesting route would be to let her live and eventually try and move past her dreams of ambitions and, her dreams of taking over the Viking throne with Rollo. I actually think that would be an interesting route, but as it stands, the death scene was well done, I will admit. So yeah, really, really enjoyed this one. Really looking forward to the future events in Vikings, and yeah, season 3 is really shaping up to be another very solid season for this show, and hopefully this show garners more attention in the future, because it really is a great show. And with that, I will see you next time.